The defense chiefs of the US, Japan and Australia held a trilateral meeting to bolster security ties Saturday in Singapore. According to Associated Press, US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Australian Defense Minister Richard Marles and Japanese Defense Minister Gen Nakatani met on the sidelines of the Shangri-La Dialogue, a global security conference hosted by the International Institute for Security Studies in Sigapore. Hegseth opened the meeting by reaffirming America's support for its allies in the Indo-Pacific, amid increasing military and economic pressure from China. America's alliances with Japan and Australia are built on common values, common shared interests, and common sense. This trilateral work is truly critical to deterring China and maintaining peace and strength in the Indo-Pacific, he said. He said Washington will bolster its defenses overseas to counter what the Pentagon sees as rapidly developing threats by Beijing, particularly in its aggressive stance toward Taiwan. China has conducted numerous exercises to test what a blockade would look like of the self-governing island, which Beijing claims as its own and the US has pledged to defend. China usually sends its own defense minister to this conference, but Dong Jun did not attend this year in a snub to the US over the erratic tariff war Trump has ignited with Beijing. Their absence was something the US delegation said it intended to capitalize on.
Minister Nakatani, to convene my first, but not the first, trilateral defense ministers meeting. We've all met individually multiple times, got to know each other quite well, and this trilateral work is truly critical to deterring China and maintaining peace through strength in the Indo-Pacific. America's alliances with Japan and Australia are built on common values, common shared interests, and common sense. They enable us to train together and be ready to defend our shared interests throughout the region. And today we are expanding substantially our trilateral work to address security threats to our countries. We're committed to increasing that trilateral participation in major new exercises and expanding cooperation amongst many things on the F-35. We're also streamlining rotational deployments in Australia and Japan while enhancing our combined strategic planning. And today, we look forward to, pending this discussion, making progress on key aspects of defense industrial cooperation, which will help us co-develop needed capabilities that will increase each of our warfighters' lethality and interoperability. So we very much look forward the discussion, appreciate the delegations present here, and anticipate a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office on Friday, President Donald Trump said he was surprised and disappointed with Russian attacks on Ukraine during peace talks led by the US. "I have gotten to see things that I was very surprised at. Rockets being shot into cities like Kiev during a negotiation that I felt was maybe very close to ending," Trump said. "We were going to solve a problem and then all of a sudden rockets got shot into a couple of cities and people died. I saw things that I was surprised at, and I don't like being surprised. So I'm very disappointed in that way," he added. According to Associated Press, during the press conference, Trump was asked if he would rather be a judge instead of president of the US after many of his administration's actions have been stopped by the courts. "It wasn't meant to be that way," he answered. Trump's big plans on trade, deportations, and more are running up against the laws of political gravity and the separation of powers. On Wednesday, a New York court rejected the legal foundation of Trump's most sweeping tariffs. The setback fit a broader pattern for a president who has advanced an extraordinarily expansive views of executive power. Federal courts have called out the lack of due process in some of Trump's deportation efforts. His efforts to humble Harvard University and cut the federal workforce have encountered legal obstacles as well. The Trump White House insists it will prevail in the end. To the president's point, there's been immense judicial overreach that is unconstitutional, and that was never intended. And it's undermining the people's faith in the legal system. It needs to stop, said Elon Musk. Trump and Musk spoke Friday during a press conference to send off billionaire and Department of Government Efficiency architect Elon Musk.
And so I really don't feel sorry for him.
As you try to fix it, and as you survey this hellscape of the Ukrainian front lines,
It's horrible.
and you and your team deal with a very stubborn Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
Do you
and
Zelensky? Yeah. But do you look at this
Very
conflict
stubborn Zelensky too.
any differently now? Like, do you look at this and see Putin as the good guy or the bad guy?
So I've known him very well, and I went through a lot of things with him because Russia was, the Russia hoax turned out to be a total hoax. New York Times, they got a Pulitzer Prize. They have to give back the Pulitzer Prize. That's my lawsuit, and they're doing very poorly in that lawsuit. But they wrote stories about how it was true and it was false, and a lot of Washington Post also. I have gotten to see things that I was very surprised at. Rockets being shot into cities like Kiev during a negotiation that I felt was maybe very close to ending. We were going to solve a problem, and then all of a sudden rockets got shot into a couple of cities and people died. I saw things that I was surprised at. And I don't like being surprised. So I'm very disappointed in that way. With that being said, I'd like to see it end in the country. But it's very important.
So many of the things that you're trying to do are held up in court right now. If the courts are going to have so much influence over U.S. policy, do you wish you would have just become a judge instead?
Yeah, well, look, it wasn't meant to be that way. If you look at the founders, the president had certain powers, and you have your three groups, and they all had supposed to be pretty equal powers. But you can't have a judge in Boston running foreign policy in places all over the country because he's got a liberal bent or he's a radical left person. That's what the executive branch is for, and you have checks and balances. But we had millions of people pour into our country, many criminals poured into our country, murderers, mental institutions from all over the world being emptied out into our country. And if we don't get them out and get them out quickly, could lose your country very easily. This is a bad, that anybody would allow this to happen to our country. And they take them. But we have judges that don't want that to happen.
I think the fundamental moral flaw of the left is empathy for the criminals and not empathy for the victims. Empathy for the criminals, but not empathy for the victims. And there's been way too much of that. That needs to stop. To the president's point, there's been immense judicial overreach that is unconstitutional. That was never intended. And it's undermining the people's faith in the legal system. It needs to stop. It's gone too far.
Person that was in favor of transgender for anybody.